When the National Executive Council announced that a decision has been reached to consider ranching, many communities in the state affected by the farmers-herdsmen clashes received the news with a sense of relief. But what happens to those displaced by the violence and even those who lost their farmland? This special report by our correspondent, Oluwa Shunibare, takes a look at one of the states that was probably the hardest hit in the herdsmen farmers crisis, and that's Benue State in north-central Nigeria.
This movement also by the nomadic herdsmen, has to stop.
The governor of Ebonyi State announcing the decision of the National Economic Council against open grazing.
We agree that the most profitable way and modern way of rearing this, cattle is by ranching.
A huge relief to many who were wondering if the pronouncement would ever come.
It looks like a welcome development. It calls for us as the individual states that have been affected, especially by this farmers-herders crisis.
It is a decision many believe would help curb the bloodletting that has left parts of the country in disharmony. The military is also taking steps to ensure the affected areas are safe from harm. The Chief of Army Staff explains that reinforcement of troops will deter militia intending to cause mayhem.
Already there is a planning committee on the ground from defense headquarters who are working on this, and there are a lot of boats that have been brought in for deployment in the waters. So they should be rest assured the place will further be safe for them to go back. And as I said earlier too, certain policies or certain laws need to be reviewed.
Out of all the states affected by the herdsmen and farmers crises, Benue State in north-central Nigeria probably has faced the greatest onslaught, covering 10 local government areas where over 50 villages have been sacked, resulting in the deaths of dozens and the displacement of thousands.
I have witnessed myself the number of killings, the destruction of properties, especially buildings, the burning down of people's homes, and the destruction of their farmlands and crops. I've witnessed all these myself. You can see the magnitude of this crisis is of unimaginable proportion.
Now that it appears the smoke of violence is clearing, two worrisome issues, among others, resulting from this crisis require urgent attention by the authorities. First is the number of people displaced from their ancestral homes. The frequency of attacks on communities has created a huge task for the state government and those involved in humanitarian efforts, with food and medicine becoming increasingly harder to provide for the IDPs. Secondly, with the farmers afraid to go to their farms due to the attacks, food crises may be staring the people in the face.
The menace of a herdsman attack against our communities has made social, economic, and religious lives impossible in the affected local government areas. That is why we are complaining and crying.
Vegetable they cheap. What they eat as they like. Now vegetable they cost. Cheese no day again. No vegetable again. No food.
The motive behind the attacks, as well as the masterminds, may remain a controversial subject for some time. But for now, all the people look forward to is to pick up the pieces and rebuild their lives from the ashes. Oluwa Shunibare, Channels Television.
Now joining us on News Across Nigeria is a humanitarian expert. She's the Chief Executive of CESA Foundation, Jonathan Echave. You're welcome to News Across Nigeria.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Now, from your assessment, what is the magnitude of this crisis situation in Benue State?
I think this is one of the most underreported and under-assessed, for want of a better word, humanitarian crises we have in this country, if not in West Africa. A few months ago, when the first attacks of the year happened in January, just from two local governments, the state government estimated there were about 80,000 people displaced. Now, we're not talking about those who have been displaced on different levels, in different ways. So these attacks started gaining ascendancy in 2014. They would pale down for a bit and then they would happen again. And so people were getting displaced. Remember also we had the floods last year in Benue, which also affected quite a number of people. So as of earlier this year, the state government had estimated there were about 180,000 people displaced. Now, talking to our partners on the ground, we go in and we take relief materials to some of the affected communities. We were last there in March, and we are gathering to go back again very soon. But talking even to our partners whom we work with on the ground, local NGOs who are actually on there right now, as I speak to you, doing the assessments, they estimate that the figures of the displaced is way higher. In some cases, they're even saying it might be as high as 500,000 people. But that will be clearer to us as time goes on. One of the challenges also, it seems to me that the government is extremely overstretched. You're dealing with a security crisis. There's a flood coming that we're not sure anyone is prepared for dealing with, and we've been getting the weather warnings that things will not be easy this year as well. So we should expect those numbers to not get any better.
All right, but you talked about over 80,000 displaced people, and those camps are housing, just 4 camps are housing these 80,000 people. Do you think that these facilities are sufficient for the displaced persons?
Well, 80,000 were just displaced from 2 local governments in January.
In Logo and Guma, okay.
Yes, in Logo and Guma. So imagine there have been more attacks across. We've not even talked about Agatu, for example, which had happened last year, or other places where things have gone wrong. So when we say 80,000, that's from that. So we're talking about 180,000 at the minimum. There were 8 camps. Initially, 1 I understand was closed because, unfortunately, too, there was not enough security there, and that camp was attacked a few weeks ago. So the place is overstretched. Also, we know from our work across Nigeria, in the northeast, in other parts of Nigeria, that when these things happen, only about 9% of the displaced end up in camps. The rest are staying with relatives in host communities, and they are basically just relying on friends, the generosity of strangers. They take refuge in churches, for example, and other places. So in some of the communities you go to now, you'll see a family hosting about 50 people, basically. So those are some of the challenges that they face. And it's not going to get any better. Mind you also, a lot of the places where they are congregating are schools. Yeah. So we're not even talking about the impact on education. Our children in those schools are also watching and seeing what is happening. Sure. There are people drifting in and out of these places, these makeshift camps. So they themselves are at risk as well. They may not, their classes are disrupted. We understand in some cases people get kicked out of the classrooms in the day so the children can go in and study. Then in the night they go back in and sleep. So the government is really stretched. There's not a lot of support coming. There are some people, you have individuals doing what they can, organizations doing what they can. I know the government has made promises, and I think some of those have been redeemed at the federal level and the state level, but there's definitely a huge need to give a lot more attention to that place from all the communities, national and international. All
right, but talking about attention, how urgent is this relocation, resettlement of the IDPs, and do we see an end to this crisis anytime soon?
I think so far the people behind the crisis and the people funding the crisis, whoever they be, as the report said, is mired in controversy, yeah. But as long as they're not found and brought to justice, it will probably continue. The one thing we noticed, which was very strange for us, is that it has a lot of political undertones as well. So the help has not been as quick to come. When the floods happened last year, the whole world descended on Benue. Yeah. The vice president went there. This one, we've seen now that with these ones, there's been a lot of people not showing up to offer the support. But more than anything, the most important thing is that there are people who are in need. We hear there are food shortages. Health is an issue. We're hearing there are outbreaks of diarrhea, measles. Children are being malnourished. We have some of the pictures. Let's pray Ebola doesn't get there.
All right. Thank you very much, Chief Executive of CESA Foundation, Jonathan Ichavi. Thank you for your time and news across Nigeria.
Thank you.